Hey, and welcome back to an episode. If you're a new executive or you've been executive for a while, you know that the 90 to first 100 days of taking on a new job are the most critical. And joining me today are Neil Marshall and Kurt Mosley from Health Search Partners. Neil is the board chair and co founder of Health Search Partners. With more than 30 years in executive search and over 600 senior level assignments under his belt, Neil is a true veteran. He's founded multiple success search firms focused on healthcare, served as a director of marketing for Merritt Hawkins, and has advised countless boards and executives on leadership talent. He's a Texas A&M grad and still lives in the Dallas area with his wife Mary. Kurt Mosley is the association's practice leader at Health Search Partners. After 31 years at AMN Healthcare and Merritt Hawkins, most recently as the vice president of strategic alliances, Kurt built and nurtured partnerships with 25 state hospital associations and many other key healthcare organizations. A nationally recognized speaker who appeared in USA Today, Modern Healthcare, and many others. Kurt brings unmatched insight into the association and healthcare leadership landscape. He's also a former baseball player and California State University Fullerton alum. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. Great to be here.
Thanks for having us, Tim.
Absolutely. So, if you don't mind, we all just heard your incredible bio and intro, but if you just tell us just a little bit more about yourself that we don't already know.
Sure. Well, as you said, I'm chair of Health Search Partners and have done executive search for 30 years. But the real focus, probably the last 3 or 4 years, has been this focus on the first 90 days, where typically in executive search, once we got you the right person for the right job in the right time, we were done. And what we really changed our focus on is, hey, not only are we going to help you get the right person, the right time, and for the right position, but then we're going to help them be successful.
And Tim, I'm Kurt Mosley. I'm the Association Practice Leaders for Health Search Partners. My role is to work with our state hospital associations, which we're very proud. 5 of them endorse our product due to the work that we do in the industry, and also a national speaker on several topics like poverty in healthcare, CEO burnout, and things and issues like that. The way this started is Neil and I were out just rock hunting. We found gold. We started finding out about all this situation with 90 days, and we'll get into it today. But again, thanks for having us.
And so let's just go right into the first question is, you guys talk about 90 days, I've heard 100 days. So the sweet spot that I hear roughly is 90 to 100 days of where executives and CEOs kind of need a hyper focus. And so my first question is why that time frame?
As you said, is it 90? Is it 100? Is it 110? We picked 90 because it's really nice and neat. 90 days is enough time for you to, for the organization to get to know you enough. And frankly, 90 days is enough time for you to either make a really good, positive first impression or make a horrible first impression that might send you out of there at some point.
So in your opinion and your experience, what really separates people in the first 90 days from those who are going to gain traction and succeed and excel versus those who don't?
Well, I think that it's somebody that's willing, Tim, number one, to listen first. A lot of the leaders go in and saying, I'm in charge. I have to move things forward. But the smart move is to be cautious, ask questions more than you talk in the first 90 days, learn the culture. And also a lot of our successful CEOs we work with really come in and look at the situation and say, I'm new here. I need your help to learn everything before I make any moves. I have to earn that right to make these decisions. I have to earn this right to change the culture of this hospital. But I have to do that first. And one of the, I think, key things for our CEOs to remember is that nobody's expecting you to be perfect. They're just looking to trust you in that first 90 days.
Now, you said in the hospitals, but I'm going to make a leap and just say out here that the first 90 days kind of like applies to everybody. So if you're listening to this or watching this and you're not in the hospital space, this can generally just reach out and apply to everybody across the board. And so you talked about the first 90 days and listening and gaining that traction. Do you have like a really good story or example of a CEO who came in and really just knocked out of the park and gain that traction right away?
Yeah, the CEO that really started us on this 90-day journey, right? It's actually been a couple-year journey, but we were interviewing a guy by the name of Richard Parks. He was a CEO of Covenant Health System in Lubbock, Texas, 22 hospitals, 10 billion in revenue. I mean, a major force in West Texas. And we were Kurt and I were interviewing him, and he said, well, whenever I start a new position, my wife stays home. She gets the house ready to sell, and I move into the hospital. And Kurt and I both look at each other and we're like, okay, Richard, everybody works hard in the first couple of months that they're there. And he said, no, I move into the hospital. And I'm like, listen, Tim, I've interviewed 10,000 hospital executives, and I'd never heard anything like that. It blew my mind. And so we asked him more, right? Okay, so what does this mean? Most big hospitals have like residence dorms where the residents sleep and the physicians that are on call all night will sleep. And he said, I move in. I said, well, tell me give me a story around that. And he said, my first day, sleep in the resident dorm, wake up. And, as old people do, I asked the youngsters, how did they sleep? And one of them said, slept like crap. These mattresses are horrible. And he said, I know somebody that can fix that. And first day on the job, he hadn't even started yet. He's still drinking coffee. He calls the VP of facilities. He says, we're going to Costco. We need 5 pickup trucks. We're buying 30 mattresses and we're replacing every mattress in the resident dorm. And tonight they'll be sleeping on new mattresses. We will. And he said that resonated through the whole organization. And it's something that people talked about his whole tenure there.
It's a great example of actions. And I know, Kurt, when we first initially asked about the questions, you said about listening and getting feedback. That's great that he listened, he got feedback. But what are the things that we need to do to generate more actionable things after we listen that really help people understand that we really care about our people and we're really there for organizational change?
Yeah, I think that, so we had a guy by the name of Jay Robinson, a CEO of 2 hospitals out in California, 2 Kaiser hospitals. And he said, one of the things that I did was I went and interviewed all 242 of my direct reports. And I'm like, well, that's significant. He said, so 2 things about it. First, I went to them. I did not have my secretary set a meeting and they came to my office. I went to their office. That was number 1. He said, number 2, I asked a series of questions, but the question I always ended up with was, if we're successful in the first 90 days, what has changed? And then he said, Neil, this was the key. I took all of that. So he either had recorded conversations or he had an assistant with him taking notes, or he took the notes. And then he allowed, what are the things that are bubbling up? What are the themes that are running through this? What is everybody saying? And then he moved those up to the top, and that's what he decided to focus on.
Wow. Go ahead, Kurt.
No, I was going to say, we had another gentleman, Jim Decker. He wrote a great book called Reviving the Heart of Leadership. And his comment to me was, in his first 90 days, it wasn't a tactic, but he said, Kurt, when you walk in, he said, I use the 25, 50, 25 rule. And I was like, okay, what's that? I hadn't heard of that. But he said the first 25, when you walk in, 25% of the people are there to support you because you're in charge. You're the leader. He goes, 25% of the people probably will never be on your side, or they'll be questioning things. He goes, so he said the middle 50%, he goes, you got to win them. And he won the middle. And he said that's how he really created that, listening to them, talking to them, regurgitating, active listening and what they were concerned with. And that middle 50 went over to his side and made his tenure a lot easier because they trusted him. And like I said earlier, they're not expecting you to be perfect, just to trust you.
It's really powerful if you got 75% of the people on your side where that middle 50 necessarily is just kind of waiting to see, what are you doing? What are you not doing? And you mentioned a phrase earlier called earned responsibility or earned authority. Could you really talk about that and kind of explain, like, what does that mean and how does that apply?
Well, I think most importantly, there's a great book out there by Marshall Goldsmith. I'm sorry, it's called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and it's really important at the start to understand you got the role. It's been awarded to you, so you don't have to go in and prove that role. And one of the big things is what you did at your last job. You may not be successful in this job. So again, you listen, you act, after you've learned what the problem is before you try to correct it. You learn the culture before you earn the right to change that culture. And you earn the responsibility to lead those people after you develop trust with the people that you work with and have their input and have their knowledge of what needs to go on in the hospital and how they're going to support you.
I was just wondering, how often do you see executives have a pre-existing notion of what the problems they're going to experience are or what the culture is, and they have a pre-existing plan where they go, you know what, these are the things that I'm going to change going in? Or do you see the opposite? Do you see more people taking your approach going, you know what, let me just find out and seek understanding first?
Well, I think we had a great story from a CEO 2 weeks prior to the board said we need a new strategic plan for the hospital. And he said, I understand. So instead of walking in and first week, I think it was there, they called him into a meeting and said, how are you working on the strategic plan? He said, I'm working on it, but I'm listening first and getting to know what's going on in the hospital. And then about week 2, the board came back to him and said, what's going on with the strategic plan? He goes, it's still in my priority wheel. But he said, I'm doing rounds, I'm listening to people. But one night he was working late. He was doing late rounds with some nurses. He was at the nurses station and he came upon one nurse and she said, are you the new CEO? And he said, yes, I am. And he said, I heard we're putting together a new strategic plan. He says, we are. And she goes, I got a hint for you. And he said, what's that? And he goes, we don't need a new strategic plan. We need IV pumps that work to take care of our patients. So he resisted that push to develop that strategic plan to make these symbolic acts, this one symbolic act that he fixed in one day to help the patients. And he earned their trust. And they knew that he listened to them. And number 2, he could help them when they needed it most. The strategic plan could wait. He didn't take the bait to rush in and develop that new strategic plan before he knew what the strategic plan was going to be all about.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. So the external pressures, getting people to act on something that may or may not be in the best interest of folks, preconceived notions. And oftentimes I see leaders, they want to make a quick fix. They want to get a quick win. However, you have a phrase where you say, be quick, but don't hurry. Can you expand upon that and how we can not set ourselves up for failure in the future?
Sure. It was from John Wooden, the NCAA basketball coach from UCLA, one of the winningest coaches ever. But he used to use it with his players. And be quick, but don't hurry. It really just means that you act quickly to learn, but you move deliberately afterwards to change. And we looked at all these different leaders that did that. They came in and they said, well, I'm not slowing down my pace. I'm just sequencing my speed at the hospital. I have to learn the problems before I correct them. I have to learn the morale before I understand them. I have to learn the people before I lead them.
And when we take all of this into context and we're like, we're listening, we're taking notes, we're doing the action plans, what are some of you say a lot about symbolic gestures. What are some other things that we can do to put in our toolkit to really gain traction in the first 90 days?
Well, I do think that that focusing on symbolic acts is an important thing, right? And we talked a little bit about that with Richard Parks sleeping in the hospital. He said this is so important that I'm gonna spend 90 days sleeping here. So, and the thing about symbolic acts are, you can send 1,000 memos, but if you spend one night in the hospital, that's going to travel much farther and much faster and much more effectively than 1,000 different memos telling people what you want them to do. And the other thing you mentioned, quick wins. We're big believers in trying to get quick wins. As a matter of fact, what we're going to counsel our people to do is negotiate that quick win up front if you can. If there's things that as you're interviewing, if there are things that are very apparent that need to be fixed, but you're going to, let's say, need some resources to do it. I'll give you an example. We had a CEO who, as he was interviewing, he called me and he said, Neil, he said, these people are, meaning the hospital, they're not paying the nurses enough. And so we can't get good nurses. And I said, well, I said, then you need to tell the board before you take the job, I need the money. And it's going to be substantive because he was going to have to raise salaries by 25%. But you need to negotiate that up front, along with your salary and your bonus and your car and all of those things. Negotiate that up front. And he was able to do that. And while it was a win for the organization, it wasn't really a win for him, but it was a win because he's the leader of the organization. And he was able to go in, and within the first quarter, he was able to put a plan in place to raise the nurses' salaries, and he was a hero.
If I can add to what Neil said, one CEO said, can you condense a symbolic act guidance for me? I said, absolutely. No fanfare, just action. Something that's visible, practical, and immediate.
It's a great definition of that. It really took me by surprise that you mentioned he included that in the negotiation, though.
That's a big one.
Yeah. How often do people do that? Because this is the first time I'm hearing about taking something that you want to get into the job for your people and say, you know what? If you want me as the leader, I also want these things as a package for my folks. And everyone listen to this. Go ahead.
I think that it is something that upper level folks will do, CEOs can do. I don't think that it's in anybody's template. Okay. Now, we have a template. Here's what you have to negotiate. And in that template is, are there quick wins? Because I want my CEOs to negotiate a quick win or two, right? Because a quick win can ripple throughout the organization, and a win is really, really good, especially if it's not something that is just about you, but it's something that is good for a group of nurses or physicians or your employee or whoever, right? But yeah, I don't think a lot of people do it, but it's done.
It's just very fascinating. And you mentioned it. I was like, oh, I never thought about that before. So I'm definitely going to include that in my kit bag. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Please do.
So we talked about all the good things that people do, but what are the biggest mistakes that people make?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, I think one of the biggest mistakes is when a new person acquires the new job, they tend to forget they're on stage at all times, whether it's, when they walk into the hospital for us, whether out in the community, whether at social gatherings, things like that. And I think what's also important is that to make sure that your audio matches your visual. Because I think Patton said it one time when he was a general in Europe after D-Day, he said, I'm on stage every day. My troops are looking to me, what I do, what I say, how I behave. And it's very important to make sure that the people are looking to you and make sure that like I said, that your visual matches your audio.
No, that's a great point. Go ahead.
The other thing that I would add is sometimes moving too fast before you truly understand the culture. I'll give you an example. Had one CEO that a lot of times when the CEO is being interviewed by the board or by the search committee, they'll ask, can I change can I make changes in my team? And the answer always is, it's your team. You have to be comfortable with them. Yes. Right. But there's more to that story. So we had one that came in and within a very short period of time decided that there was one person on the team that was just not going to work and showed them out. But what they didn't understand was this person happened to be one of the most popular executives in the whole organization. And it caused a serious ruckus. And it took a long time for the CEO to recover. Now, I'm not saying that the CEO shouldn't be able to do their own team. I absolutely agree with that. I think they should. You should never have anybody on your team you don't want. But you also need to understand, if you're going to make a change, let's go a little bit further. Let's talk to the chairman of the board and float that balloon by him, see what they think, right? Talk to a couple other executives, figure out, hey, you know what? If this person really is that popular, maybe I take a little more time to decide. Maybe I try and figure out where the issue is. And then if I still have to move them out, then how about if I do it in such a graceful way that nobody even knows it,
Mm.
right?
I think Tim, it was probably the right decision, wrong timing.
Yeah, I want to tease that out a little bit because oftentimes we hear you got to surround yourself with people that you trust, and you got to be able to surround yourself with a team that are people that are on board. And if you have one dissenter that throws off the whole cohesion of the organization. And if you have somebody who's popular, but not necessarily the best fit for the team, what do you think is the best way to navigate that? Because I know you said probably right decision, wrong time, but when would be the right time?
Well, if number one, just the recognition is going to change how you're doing things. Number two, if you're going to move them out in such a graceful way that, by the end of it, they're happier, you're happier, and the organization is happier. Okay. And what I mean by that is, you have a closed door session and you say, look, for whatever reason, we're not going to G-Haul, and that's fine, but I'm going to support you 100%. And we're not going to talk, but for the next year, you need to be looking for another position. And as soon as you find it, you get to quit and you go to your next position. You've got no, you're not going to move. You're not going to lose any money. You're not going to lose any esteem. You're the one making the decision publicly.
Yep. So how often do politics, right? Because to a certain degree, there's always politics involved at the senior levels. So how often do people allow politics to dictate their decisions versus actually coming in and saying, I'm going to seek understanding and change the culture? How often does politics override the actual change that needs to happen?
Yeah, I think enough. Yeah, I mean, politics are real. The organizational community politics are real, and you have to take those into consideration in everything that you do. And if you don't, you're going to end up stubbing your toe.
In our industry, margins are extremely tight at hospitals right now. There's always administration, physician tension, if you will. Staff morale goes up and down, especially now with everything going on in the industry. So you're walking into that, and that sometimes equates to politics, sadly. So you have to deal with it, but at the same time, you can't lose focus on the ultimate mission, which is taking care of your employees and taking care of, in our industry, taking care of the patients in your facility.
Absolutely. I want to kind of touch back to the stage part that you always say you're on stage. I call it the fishbowl mentality, right? So if you're the guy in charge, you live in a glass house, everything you see and do is watched, observed by everybody else. So how often do you find people losing credibility in the first 90 days because they fail to understand that, or they gain a lot of momentum because they understand that?
Well, I think that if we're working with them, they're the ones that are going to gain momentum because we're going to talk about things like that. We're going to talk about the fact that you're on stage. We're going to talk about that you want your audio to match your video. Okay. We're going to talk about, well, I'll give you an example. We had a CEO who, in healthcare today, he who attracts and retains employees is going to win. Employees are incredibly important. You can't pay more than anybody else. So really the culture has to attract the people, right? And so he drove into the hospital for his first day. His parking spot was right next to the hospital, right next to the chief operating officer and the CFO and the chief medical officer. The whole executive team was right next to the hospital. Well, they had like 5 parking lots, huge hospital, 5 parking lots. All the employees had to park like a half a mile away. And so he went into his first executive meeting and he kind of set them up a little bit. He said, what are the things that are most important? And somebody said, our employees are the most important. And he said, okay, well, if they're so important, why are we parking right next to the hospital and making them park a half a mile away? So from now on, that parking is now for employees of the month. Each of the directors of the month and employees of the month are going to park there. And we, as the executive team, are going to park beyond where our employees park. And then every morning we're going to spend that time walking to the hospital and greeting our employees. And they're going to see that they really are that we believe they are more important than we.
That's a very tangible point. And I say that because my wife, she works in healthcare as well, and she works at a hospital, and her parking lot literally is off campus, and she has to take a shuttle
Shut up, right.
into the hospital every day, and so I don't know where the executives park, and I'm not going to get into that. But the fact that you're like, hey, if our people could take a shuttle and come in, we're no longer immune to that either. We're just as good to do that as well. And that's a great, tangible act and display that really puts that point forward. So I appreciate you sharing.
And if they're in the shuttle, what are you doing when you're in the shuttle? You're greeting your employees, right? You are saying hello to them. You are meeting them. You're asking them how their weekend was. It's an invaluable time as an executive to be able to build relationships with your employees.
It's also a great time to get feedback because you're out and about. I always believe about leadership by walking around. If you're in your office behind closed doors, you're not really getting any feedback but your own. And so if you're on that shuttle, taking that ride at 10 to 15 minutes, people will talk to you. I've noticed that myself is that if the more you're out, and the more you're about, people will just say, hey, I want to share this with you. And you get that invaluable feedback that you might not have gotten anywhere else. Go ahead, Kurt.
I was going to say that we've had CEOs that maybe walked into a friction situation with the physicians in their facility in the first 90 days, like 2 or 3 days a week, they ate lunch in the doctor's lounge. Didn't solicit, just sat there, and people came up and said, "Who are you? I'm the new CEO. Do you have a minute?" And he had a napkin with his not a business card. He had a napkin with his cell phone and his direct email address. He said, "If you need anything, here I am." And he developed that rapport, kind of saying, "I'm meeting with you. I'm understanding you. I want to get to know you." It's a great tactic.
And for those that haven't experienced yet, some of the best conversations you're going to have are with a napkin and a pen, talking to somebody else, drawing something out or hashing an idea out. So those moments are amazing to have. So my last question to both of you is there anything that we didn't talk about that you're like, you know what, Tim, I really wish you would have asked me this one question, or wish we would have touched on this subject?
I think, Tim, my father told me this once. I think you hit, first of all, let me back up. You hit on everything, and appreciate you walking through all our comments about the 90-day series, which we firmly believe in. But my father told me this at one time. He said, "I'm going to give you words of wisdom," as fathers do. And he said, "Remember in life, Kurt," he said, "it's hard to talk your way out of something you behaved yourself into." And that's something I tell all CEOs before they go in day one. Obviously, what we talked about earlier, being on stage. But again, it's hard to talk your way out of something you behave yourself into. Don't forget that.
Yeah. And what I would say is that, number one, I appreciate kind of the way you approach these conversations. It's thoughtful and practical, but it's also grounded kind of in real leadership things, right? I guess what I would probably want to say in if I had my career to do all over again, right? When I'm starting a new position, I would want to take a moment and stop and be very intentional about who I want them to see and what I need to do to have them see that person. Everybody can do the job. Okay. It's about that next level. Who do you want them to see?
And so besides going to the show notes and looking up, all the links and everything else that we're going to provide, how can folks reach out to you?
Sure. Kurt and I are both on LinkedIn. Neil Marshall and Kurt Mosley on LinkedIn. On the web, our organization, Health Search Partners. It's www, just like it sounds. And we've got all of our information on the website.
Tim, if I can add, if we have any CEOs or anybody that's listening to the podcast today and wants to share their story about their success or symbolic act in those first 90 days, we'd sure love to interview them and include them into an article in our series, which eventually we're going to put together all of our articles and all the interviews, and eventually it'll evolve into a book about this whole first 90 days, the how to define your leadership legacy. Have them reach out to us. We'd love to talk to them.
So for everyone watching, you heard what Kurt said. Go ahead and contact them or comment on this episode and let us know your acts that you did in the first 90 days that got you where you needed to be. So for everyone watching and listening to this right now, appreciate you stopping by and listening. And Neil and Kurt, I really appreciate you stopping by and having this great conversation with us. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Tim.
Really enjoyed it, Tim.